Alexia. Welcome to the Wise Man Show. I'm pleased we're kind of rejoining the conversation, aren't we? Because we had an interesting debate online a couple of months ago about personal branding, and I expressed my views that maybe it didn't fit in quite the way in which we thought it did. And I've written these points out for us so that we can unpack them for the audience and see where we are in the end. And the first thing that we have, Alexia, is this idea of, and I think you're quite big in this idea that brands aren't created but discovered. Now, I think that's a very nice term, Alexia, but I wanted to know what you meant by that, because my instinctive reaction is that can't be right.
And we're talking personal brands here, aren't we?
We're talking personal brands, yeah.
Yeah. For me, your brand is discovered because you are that personal brand. You've been creating your brand since you were born. Everything that you've lived, everything that you've done, all the things that you've achieved, you've been doing that since the year dot. So, yeah, you might want to talk to a 4-year-old that they're currently creating their brand, but we don't tend to have those sorts of conversations with kids. So now, when it comes for us to want to define what our brand is about, we need to discover what our brand is. We don't just start to create it, because if we're creating something, then that means that it's going to be fake and it's not going to be authentic.
Right. I mean, this is educational for me. This is why a Skype video call is so much better than blogging comments, because I find suddenly that we're not in disagreement with this. Because I thought initially that when you're sort of positing these differences between brand creation versus brand discovery, that somehow a personal brand wasn't something that we made, but it is. It's just that you're saying that we've made it from your dot, and maybe we've forgotten what it is or forgotten how to articulate that. And brand discovery is really rediscovery of stuff that perhaps has always been in the subconscious.
Absolutely. I mean, our personal brand has been built up over many years, and the problem we've got now is we need to define ourselves. So we need to decide what our brand is. And actually, that's the problem. That's the creation part. It's understanding, based on what you're trying to achieve, looking at what you have done, all the personal assets that you have that are intangible, so those things that nobody can take away from you, your skills, your strengths, your experiences, all that stuff makes up your personal brand. And now it's up to you to decide how you choose to define your brand by weaving some of these things together to wrap up an individual, unique package that's you. That's the creation bit, is creating the package. Yeah. But inherently, what's inside of that is you've all got to pick up stuff that's there already. You can't create the stuff that's inside because it's you.
Yeah. I'm 100% in agreement with that because and this is revelatory for me. We could move on to the next thing. But the idea that we have, I'm not a big believer in, actually, before I start making statements, let's be sure what I do believe. But I think what we're talking about here is the idea that we have things in the subconscious, isn't it? We're kind of unconsciously competent at certain things. And what you're talking about is that we need to bring that into kind of a conscious competence of what it is. And then the creation part is the articulation and communication of what that essential you is.
Yeah, and the package as well, because the package will be very different depending on what your environment is, who you're competing against. I don't like the word competing, but nevertheless you will compete for people, for jobs, for contracts. If you're an author, for books, you will be challenged. I prefer the word challengers or rival, because those are the people that are really forcing you to be better at what you do so that you excel and achieve what you want. So depending on who you are being challenged by will force you to highlight different aspects of yourself, because you want to highlight different parts to what everybody else has got to offer, so that you stand out. So the creation and the interesting part of the personal brand is really learning about yourself sufficiently so that you can highlight the bits that are going to make you stand out.
You see that frown on my face?
Yeah, I do see that frown. Yeah. What did I say that brought that up?
Yeah, because when you start sort of modifying your message, if you like, in reaction to the market, isn't that a step away from that personal brand that you're referring to? Isn't that like one step closer to this kind of artificial manufacture of a brand? I mean, let's say I am this person with skills A, B, C, and there's another guy next door to me who is also exactly skills A, B, C. He's just better than me. Shouldn't I just think, okay, he's just better. I've just got to do my thing. Charge less money, do whatever I've got to do. It would be wrong for me to start thinking D, E, F, wouldn't it?
No. The skills are one thing. But it's how you do. The skills is your expertise. You can build up your skills over many years from being very good and repeating a task so many times that you're very good at it. But your strengths are going to be what define you. So your skills are the what, but it's the how you do what you do. And that's your strength. So you might be in a moment of flow when you do certain tasks because you're maximising on your strengths, and your strengths might be creativity, they might be compassion and understanding with others, ability to connect. But you're still doing certain tasks that you might be competing with that person. And the way that you do it differently is the how. So you need to communicate why you should be hired, because you do it your way, and it's your way that makes it more interesting, more likeable, more viable, whatever it is that you're in. But for example, taking an example like yourself in recruitment, before the online environment, you would have marketed and communicated what you're about in a certain way to recruitment agencies or whoever, whatever your message would have been. Whereas now the environment's changed, the people you're competing with has changed, and so now you choose to describe what you do in a different way to make it more relevant. It doesn't change the content or exactly what you're doing, you're just changing how you're describing what you're doing.
There is no competition for wise man say, Alexia.
And that means you have a very strong brand, because Apple don't have any competitors either, do they?
That's it. It's an open field for me, open field. But no, seriously speaking, okay, that's very interesting. So essentially, we need to understand how to deliver our story that is in a manner that differentiates us from the competition, basically.
Yeah, and I like the fact you use the word story, because for me story is really, really important. And a lot of people, when they differentiate or they choose to describe what they do, they're very good at listing facts. I worked here for such and such year, I held this position, I achieved X, Y, Z, yawn, 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 yawn. We really aren't very well wired to learn and to remember lists of facts. So to describe yourself in that way is not going to make you very memorable. However, what we do have in our arsenal are loads of experiences, of loads of things that we've done. We've got anecdotes, we've got stories of challenges we've overcome, and that's the really juicy, meaty stuff that people want to hear. They want to understand what you've done in context. What you want to do is want to tell a story so that you're engaging people on that emotional level. And when people have their emotions engaged, they're more likely to buy. People don't buy the products that you're buying. People don't buy those things having made a rational decision. Oh, well, I'm going to buy this because it's less expensive and I'll get more what's it's in a packet than I do with that one. They're buying on emotions, and that's where big businesses build brands. So to capitalise on that emotional engagement on a personal level is really, really important. And the way that we can do that is through telling a story. And so understanding what your own story is and what is the bigger story. Maybe you've got this lifelong question, capital Q, that you want to find the answer, capital A, for, and this is why you do what you do. And maybe there's a reason why you want to find the answer to this. And so sharing that with people and getting them involved in your quest to find the answer. And you might not be perfect, but you're on this mission to find out what's going on here, and you're happy to share with people your learnings on the way. And people will get behind that. Whereas if, you sort of tell them, well, I worked here and I've got credibility because I held this position, people just aren't engaged by that.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. Isn't there a case that there's the sort of, what is it, 7 story archetypes that every culture sort of is very familiar with, and almost any story that you write is, or any novel that you read or wherever it is, it kind of goes along that type of that follows that pattern, if you like.
Basic plots.
Yeah, exactly. Something similar to that. I mean, do you think that applies to personal branding? I mean, there's a finite number of if you like, brand stories that we need to, the skeletons, if you like, that we then need to kind of fill in the gaps with our own sort of personality and style and all the rest of it. But
I don't think there's a finite number of brand stories, but certainly if you were to look at the 7 basic plots and to try and understand what your own personal story is within that, because there's always going to be an element of some of those within your own personal story. So some of the basic story plots, just for those that haven't heard, and I'm not going to be able to remember all of them off the top of my head, but I'll do my best. There's tragedy, there's comedy, there's the journey, the quest, returning from the journey. And I'll stop right there because I can't remember. Overcoming the monster is another one. So there's, and things like Star Wars, for example, have got many of those stories interwoven within the plot. So is Lord of the Rings, the idea of going on a journey, coming back, overcoming the monsters, all within those stories, the good against evil. So there's going to be elements of that within your own life. And so it's, if you can maybe try and find what those are and weave some of those plots into the way that you tell your story, then you'll be engaging, and people will just kind of, on a very subconscious level, just remember what you're about, because they're kind of, you'll resonate with them on a very deep level, and that's good for you because it means you'd like to be remembered.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's a case where maybe these are cultural traditions that you learn at a really young age, the fairy stories or whatever things that, your parents have taught you, perhaps for entertainment reasons more than anything else, but they underlying sort of, they communicate an underlying pattern of life, if you like, life stories, that stay with you. So, maybe that's something that we need to explore in more depth. But anyway, let's press on, Alexia. Let's press on. The story potentially is a rabbit hole for us.
Yes, it could be.
That's the second time I've used rabbit hole today. But anyway, let's talk about this idea, which I think is the case, that brands. The reason why personal branding, I'm not entirely comfortable with that, is because the brands are sort of inflexible. They're sort of very different. There's a set of brand values, set of expectations. We expect this, and yet human beings, as you and I both know, totally inconsistent, different moods, different things. We're not going to be able to live a branded lifestyle, if you like. We're going to be a human being, very messy in terms of how we live and the decisions we make and what have you. And then suddenly we have this pressure of adhering to a brand where it's difficult. It's difficult to maintain. It's difficult. The brand doesn't capture the inconsistency of human life, I guess. What's your thoughts on that, Alexia?
Well, this is the one in your blog originally that really got me sort of going in terms of, because for me, coming from the world of business brands, consistency is everything. And however, there are a number of well-reputed brand people within the branding industry now that are sort of really challenging the need for consistency, or certainly the requirement that brands should be consistent. But for me, consistency comes from applying your values consistently. And that's, for me, that's the consistency that I talk about. What you're talking about is it's very hard to live up to a fixed idea of a brand, and corporates can do that very well with business brands because they are just 2D. Most that a business brand may flex or have different facets is they might have a trade brand versus a consumer brand, but ultimately, or brands may differ depending on whether it's the US being sold or Europe. So that's the only way they might flex. Whereas we have, work persona, we have pub persona, we have gym persona, we have kids persona, whatever it is that we have in our lives, we have different roles that we live, and each of the roles that we have require us maybe to flex a different part of ourselves. But the way that I like to think of this is undercurrently, it's almost like we have a track that we have that's running, that is our life, and then on different rooms in the house, you might want to just hike up the bass or the treble, depending on what's appropriate for that room. And so that's what your brand is about. At its very core, you do stand for a certain set of values, and those are very unlikely to change over time. They will shift as a result of a significant life event or a massive, something that's changed in your life, but your values aren't going to change significantly. So when I talk about consistency, what I'm talking about is behaving consistently along your values. What you're not going to do is 1 minute start sort of saying that, you're going to vote BNP and this is really important to you and you're anti-immigration, and the next minute, do something that stands on the opposite side to that, because that would be massively inconsistent. And if you were to talk on those things, then I wouldn't know what to expect from somebody that would do that. And that's what I mean by lack of consistency. However, if one day your mood swings and you're having a crap day and you want to vent, then you're absolutely entitled to vent and have moments where you do whinge, whatever it is that people might want to do, but that will still happen in line with what's important to you and what your underlying unwritten rules of behaviour are.
Yeah, I can understand that, but I mean, at the same time, people are entitled to change their minds, right? As we move through life, we accumulate new knowledge and we discard stuff that we previously had, held dear and so forth. We're entitled to change our minds. I might be, I feel a sudden raging need to vote for the BNP. I'm entitled to make that decision, right?
Absolutely.
So isn't it the case that brands are therefore inflexible? They can't grow with us, I guess, is the point I'd make.
No, I don't think a brand is inflexible. Brands are evolving living things. Even a business brand is not inflexible. They grow and evolve and they respond to what's going on around them and they engage. They do.
No, they don't. I mean, look, Mercedes-Benz doesn't suddenly decide to produce washing machines. They produce cars.
No, well, they're quite a mature brand, and so that's when we start talking about how old is the brand. So just as somebody who's got an established career in their 50s is unlikely to do a massive career change and start doing something completely random different. They might do, but it's unlikely if they've got a very well-established brand, personal brand, in doing what they do.
Right, that's the point. That's a very key point, because therefore a brand isn't portable, it's not flexible. You have to leave it behind. I mean, let's imagine this guy that you talked about. He's created a brand. He's now this, that, and the other. Some great lawyer, perhaps, or whatever sort of image he's created. He decides, right, I don't want to be this person. I want to, be a beachcomber in Torquay. Now, if he was to do that, the effort he's put in to building the brand as a lawyer is not something he can take with him as a beachcomber in Torquay. He has to start from zero.
Absolutely, but the reason, I think we're going to go back to why are we doing personal branding? Why are we managing our brands? Why do we want to communicate ourselves consistently in this way? And that is because we want to sell ourselves. It all boils down to money. So if this lawyer's decided to hand it all in and retire for life on the beach, at that point, he's really not really bothered about his personal brand anyway.
Right.
You really want to start managing your brand and actively managing it if you want other people to respond to what you're doing and you want to influence other people. If somebody's going to ditch the public life or their career and go and work in a hermit-style lifestyle on the beach, then personal branding really isn't relevant to them anymore.
Yeah.
You take somebody like Bill Gates, who was quite established, and now he's going from the head of Microsoft to now a big philanthropist. And so for him, he's now communicating very different messages to what he used to do as the head of Microsoft. So you can reinvent and change direction. There's no reason why I can't do that.
Yeah.
It's completely okay to...
But you have to leave your brand behind. But
you think Nokia, they never started out making phones. They rediscovered, they responded to what's going on in the market, and let's hope they respond again.
That's true. Indeed. we got love for you, Nokia. Come on. But I think you're right. Even Mercedes-Benz, that was a bad example. Didn't they make machine guns or something? Okay, so but I think we sort of agree, even though we haven't said it. Basically, you create a brand. It is kind of more rigid than you are, because it is what I call a customer shortcut, right? I mean, this is what I think the brand is. It's ultimately a shortcut for a buyer to try and process what the hell you sell, because they can't be asked to sort of think about, oh, look, I'm going to process Alexia Leachman in all her sort of 100% human beingness. They want a brand because they want to make a 2-second decision as to whether this person is someone I can do business with. So because we've created and articulated the brand and all that kind of stuff, we've created an asset that allows us to do that, but we can't move that around with us. We have something that ultimately, if we decide to change track or move down a different road, we kind of have to let that go.
No, you don't, because there's always going to be elements of your brand that you can transfer, and this happens a lot within the corporate space. Brands want to relaunch themselves, want to reposition themselves, and so you take what the common areas are between where you currently are and where you want to be. You start trading on the areas of commonality, and then you start acting in accordance with where you want to be, and start building up experiences for your target market that start reinforcing that this is where you now are, and changing the message out there by sending messages out using your own personal PR strategies or whatever it is you're doing, using social media, and gradually you can shift and take yourself to a new place. And that is not insurmountable or impossible.
Right, and I think that's probably... I mean, I don't want to sort of challenge you to come up with examples. That doesn't either prove or disprove your point. But I'm going to ask you anyway, because I think you'll come up with one. So, is there an example that you could cite? I mean, for my...
I think I'm an example. I used to have a career in marketing, and I was an employee, and I wanted to transition. And so it was about finding what are the areas of commonality, what have I been doing before that's now relevant to what I'm doing now. And yeah, there are some elements of consistency, of commonality, and I start trading on the areas of commonality and then start adding more stuff to my arsenal, and gradually, the longer you do it, suddenly you're this new person. But sure, there's a couple of years or whatever that transition period is in between where it feels like it's when you set up on a boat and you've left one shore and you're halfway on choppy water and you can see the land over there. You're not quite there yet, but you're going and you know what you need to do to get there. And so it's about consistently communicating where it is that you're heading so that people understand what you're about. And if you don't consistently communicate, you start being a bit woolly, go, well, I think I'm still over here, oh, I'm not here. Then that's where confusion arises, and that's where you might never make it. So it's about really sticking to where it is that you want to go. So there's absolutely no reason that you can't bring the great brand values and the recognition that you had before into what you now want to do. And reinvention is something that a lot of people have to face right now because there's so many redundancies. They have to pick a new career. The jobs just don't exist anymore where they were.
Yeah, well, actually, that's a very interesting point, because maybe the concept of relaunch isn't the right one, because that suggests that you sort of you launch something, now that thing just ends up there, doesn't it? You don't,
I know that's my old corporate day.
You launch it, it's there. But maybe the key to transitioning is to actually articulate your journey as you move from one sort of thing that you're doing to another. So, for example, our lawyer, if he wanted to maintain some of his brand value into his new life as a beachcomber, he needs to not just appear in Torquay, he needs to tell people, his old audience, that actually, you know what, this is what I've been thinking, this is what I reckon, what do you think? And then take the audience with him to the journey, and maybe that way a brand can be portable.
Yeah, if the similar target, if the people that you're talking to, the people that are going to help you achieve what you want, so a lawyer, the people that he's going to want to be talking to that are going to help, new potential new clients, people that are going to help him be successful as a lawyer, they're going to be a very different group of people to those that are going to help him be successful as a beachcomber. So if they might be, they might not.
But
if they're very different groups, then it's a different conversation that he needs to be having with each group. And so that's the thing, it's about managing the expectation and making sure that you're keeping your audiences that are going to help you updated and with what you're doing, and making sure that you're engaging with them all the time.
Yeah. I'm going to spring something on you now. We agreed a list of topics.
Yeah.
There's one thing I didn't write down there. I thought, let's spring it on Alexia. Okay, here it is. Big challenge to personal branding, I suspect, is going to be the transparency that the social web is forcing on everyone. In other words, today is a good example of it, actually. Today, I was obliged to comment on a blog where I had a personal account. In other words, I'd set up this. You can check it out. Actually, it's in the Guardian comments. Comment is free, and me banging on about cover letters and why it's pointless doing it. But I have a personal account on that isn't anything to do with my business. This is me talking as Hungle, as a matter of fact, bit of a typo, but there we go. And essentially, here was a situation where this person, this image that I had out there, which is very distinct from the Wise Man Say brand, there was a clash of these brands suddenly. They came together in a jarring clash. And I think that's sort of an example of what's going to increasingly happen as the divide between professional and personal starts to become meaningless. And I think a lot of people have gone down the route of Facebook for play, LinkedIn for work, and have almost a very separable lifestyle between the two, and probably over the early years of working with these platforms have separate profiles and different things. But aren't we now moving into a point where it's impossible to maintain those identities on separate platforms? Everyone's going to be the transparency will come out, and that's going to have a big challenge for personal brands that have always kind of been dependent on not putting too much personal in there?
I don't think it's a challenge at all. I think transparency is happening everywhere right now. I mean, the Super Injunction incident that was in the press just over the last couple of weeks is a brilliant example of transparency of social media. And what actually that's forcing us to do is that's forcing us to really be more mindful about our actions. And to be more, if you're more mindful about how you behave, and you want to make sure that you behave in accordance with your values and how you want other people to know you, then it doesn't matter which network they come and meet you on, because you're always behaving in a way that you're proud of. So, but you can't be managing multiple personas anymore. I mean, half of the Facebook board are on the LinkedIn board. I mean, at some point they're going to merge. And then what happens? Two worlds will collide. Now, I'm personally finding that a lot of people that I know professionally now have started to connect with me on Facebook. And so it now starts to change what I put on Facebook as a result, because actually, I wouldn't say, I've just started to be a lot quieter.
No more party pics of Alexia.
No. Because of this very thing. But I think the transparency, it means that we'll self-police. It means that we'll hopefully, my hope is that people will start to behave a lot better, because the whole world's watching. You don't know when somebody's going to take a picture on their smartphone and it'll be on the internet within minutes. And so you need to be more mindful of how you behave, and that's got to have a good effect for people around, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what? I'm pleased you said that, Alexia. You're one of the very few people that I've heard articulate that point, because we've had a lot of defenders of privacy out there, in the sense of, oh my goodness, Facebook is stealing this, that, or the other, or, all this behavior. And my view is, look, hasn't privacy, what has it actually given us? It's basically given us license to behave quite badly at times, to get away with stuff that would be embarrassed to see publicly. And my posture to this, particularly when I had this Facebook moment, and that happened this is where I connected with you, Alexia, because basically I came through to this point where I thought I was so conscious of keeping my private life separate from my work life that I found I wasn't going on Facebook anymore, because I was very conscious of putting information on there or having stuff on there that could otherwise be misconstrued or whatever, paranoia more than anything else. But then I realised this, look, ultimately, if you're ashamed of it, don't do it. If you're ashamed of doing these things or being captured on camera, drunk, doing this, that, and the other, you know what, just don't do that. And if you aren't ashamed, then fine. But ultimately, it's had a massive impact in terms of how, I guess, I'm living my life at this point. Primarily giving up the booze, I have to say.
Yeah, that's pretty monumental.
Yeah, exactly. Because I thought, okay, I can try and maintain a lifestyle whereby I keep my private and personal totally separate. And I realised, look, that's just not feasible. That's going to take so much energy to do. I can't do that. You know what? Instead of adjusting the privacy settings, I've got to adjust the behaviour settings. I've got to change the behaviour. So I think I'm living a better life. I think ultimately I'm making better choices because I know I can't get away with the bad ones anymore.
Yeah. No, I think that's great that you've made those changes as a result of this. And that's quite commendable, given that booze.
Yeah.
Not
100%, but, no more of this, getting completely ruined type of behaviour, which, never suited me anyway, to be honest. But anyway, okay, let's talk about the final thing here. We are talking about, it goes right back to the story. We're talking about language. And maybe a lot of the problems that we have our usage of language may not be particularly appropriate for when we're discussing the human image and the story that we need to tell. And is brand the right word for that? And I think we sort of agree maybe brand isn't the exact, perfect word.
Yeah, I really don't like the term personal branding. And I think that, there's a delay there, is that right?
Don't worry about that. That's, okay. Do wonders with editing.
Do you want to ask me that question again then?
Right, okay. I was hoping to do minimal edits actually, because it's a bit of a pain in the arse. But I'll ask it again. Okay. What was the question? The question was, okay, is personal brand, the word brand, the best way to describe, what we're actually doing?
I think the term personal branding is terrible, personally, and certainly from my times when I worked in marketing, marketeers don't know what brand means. So how is the person on the street going to understand what personal branding means? And I think it's quite alienating as well, because a lot of people think that's not for me, and so they kind of sort of don't come near any sort of talk about it. They don't think that that's something that they need. But also, it's not very clearly defined. There's a lot of people that have an impression about what personal branding is. There's a lot of people selling personal branding when it's not really. I mean, you have personal stylists saying they do personal branding, when actually they're really helping you to focus on the way that you present yourself using your clothes. And that's just a tiny, tiny strand of branding. That's like saying that the packaging design is what makes the product and the brand. It's not just the box that your apple comes in. It's everything else. It's your experience of it. It's what it's good at, what you can rely on your apple for. There's so much more to a brand than just certain snippets of it. And again, you've got other people that say it's all about managing the social networks and making sure you've got an online presence. Again, that's just a tiny strand of what your brand is. So, until we can get really clear on what a personal brand is, what it means, but also a word that doesn't really repel people in the way that I think currently personal branding is. And I don't really know what an alternative might be, but certainly when I talk to people and I run workshops and seminars and things, some of the ways that I do describe it is, understanding how to make the most of your personal intangible assets. So that sounds that can sound a bit, too much for some people as well, but it's maybe your personal capital. What is it that you have that you can trade on to achieve more of what you want, leveraging your personal capital? But again, I've not really come up with something that I'm 100% comfortable with, because it doesn't exist yet, I don't think. But so let's start with personal branding, I think, for the time being.
I think you're right. I think personal capital, social capital, we've heard. I think they are better terms, in my view, because it gives the feeling that there's a volume of capital that you can then sort of disperse or accumulate, or in other words, build. But still, that's another term that we've lifted from a different context, and we've put it in here. And you wonder whether we're going to carry values from finance into this area, as we've carried values from marketing into this area, and that absolutely will also repel people. So we need to get Shakespearean, don't we, Alexia? We need to start coining a word that he did all the time. He made stuff up.
He makes stuff up all the time.
He invented words and said, "Look, that's a word." And that's helped enrich our understanding of the nuance of what he's talking about, and maybe we need to have some kind of council meeting of personal brand people, and we just agree a term and stop using personal branding and use the new thing. But anyway, Alexia, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for coming on the Wise Man Show. Well, what do you think? I mean, this is an experiment, but I thought this, was a lot more efficient than writing blog comments, wasn't it? Because that took ages to do. But at the same time, it's certainly a lot more interactive, in the sense that I learned more. I came in, was fairly fixed positions, but I was able to figure out what you were meaning and change my position and so on. I wouldn't be able to do that on a blog. I would have just got angry on a blog comment, and we would have just been flaming each other. That's no good. Okay, so in future, what I'm going to do, I'm going to have maximum 2 rallies on a blog comment, and then I'm going to challenge people to a Skype video conference call.
That's a great idea.
Yeah. Okay, Alexia, thank you very much. You have a good day. I'll speak to you soon.
Okay, bye.